So what's different about what you're doing currently? You're taking in the raw original session tracks that are feeding both a stereo mix and then an Atmos mix.
Yes.
So that all of those decisions that you're making about the feel, the overall picture are informed in both places. There's nobody that's talking about approach. I've been listening to the binaural fold downs, and I feel like it's just going to replace stereo because they're getting so good.
There were definitely some mixes that I was listening to. Like, it's been a while since I've listened through a playlist of mine.
Yeah.
But I listened through the other day where I was like, I'm working on some wood. I'm just going to like listen down. And there were times when I'd flip back to stereo and I go, oh, like you lose a little something now.
Yeah.
Like it gets cleaner, but it's more separated.
Yeah.
So like whatever disparity was there, it kind of came on par, and now it's just a little different. But it's like when you get used to listening to the different, and it's a good mix, so you can appreciate like what's happening spatially, and then you turn it off and you're like, oh, this just feels a little dry and detached. Yeah, I'm monitoring the binaural at the same time.
Is that what you're calling your stereo mix?
No.
When we're talking about this? Is that a separate thing?
It's separate.
That you're doing? In the same template?
Yes.
See, that's the ridiculous part. Because the only other approach that people are using is basically like, I'm going to listen to the binaural, okay, then sacrifice the actual Atmos mix to try to make the binaural better. Yes. That's what I'm hearing people talk about.
Regardless, everybody's process right now is either, like I would say a minority is mix in Atmos and use the 2.0 fold down as your stereo. There's very few people doing that. It may get to a point where people are doing that, but the majority of people are mixing in stereo and then printing stems, going into an Atmos mode and like doing everything there, but they've already kind of like done stereo. And so what I was trying to do was have both worlds going at the same time, which is they're multed out. So all of my individual channels mult to a set of stereo stems. So like drums, loops, whatever you would split. It's like they go to a set of those, and then there's an Atmos set that's like 714. And then all of those go to a stereo 2 bus and a Atmos bus, which there's the 714 bed, and then there's another 714, which we'll just call it 12 channel mono, 12 channels, and then another 12, so that's 36, right? 12 times 3, right. So there's 36 channels of processing that are all grouped together and tied together, side chained together. So when all the Atmos stuff goes through those, if it's just going through 714 bed, it's just 714. But if I want to move through objects, which is the point of Atmos, this is where everybody's like
object
on their individual channels, they've changed something to an object. But what I'm doing is changing the output from that Atmos 714 bed into, I'll just call it like object spin. Like let's say an organ, right? I want it to oscillate around me. I may take that out of the bed and put it in the spin track, which then still goes through another 12 channel bus that's getting the exact same treatment as the 714. Same compression. I mean, the only thing that's getting different is saturation, because saturation is gain dependent.
Right.
But it's going through all of that, and then that output, or that input I should say, of a object spin is split into 6 stereo channels. So there's like spin, rotate, oscillate, whatever, that are already doing some movements, and those are the objects.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's funneling through a bus first.
Yeah.
Then it goes out to objects. So I get the squeeze, and here's the beauty. If you're running stereo and Atmos at the same time, you have your 2 bus. If you play your cards right, everything that you've got on your 2 bus can be built on the Atmos bus. So you can have the same treatment, and you can side chain it. Like you can make sure
I can't wrap my mind around that part.
So Well, yeah. So here's my question. So you do an automation, right? A vocal automation that swells in. That gets reflected in the tuba. Can we just call it like two bus for the stereo mix?
Yeah.
We'll call it stereo mix. Stereo mix.
Stereo bus.
It also gets reflected in the Atmos tracks as well, right?
So the beauty of doing it that way is at the track level, it's one set of decisions.
Right.
Like
So
you do an EQ, it goes to both worlds. You do an automation, it goes to both worlds. You're making decisions in real time. Like you don't have to commit your stereo world, move into Atmos and find you have a problem after the fact. You're like, and if you need to split the worlds, let's say,
that's so genius.
Oh, this guitar part is blending well and carving well in the stereo mix, but I need to do something different in Atmos. Well, you just duplicate that track and like, okay, this one's only going to stereo, this one's only going to Atmos.
Oh, it's so smart. But it's so smart.
It's all within the same session. People come back with tweaks. Like, you can tweak the stereo and Atmos at the same time. Like, it's just one round of tweaks.
Did you high-five yourself when you did this for
the
first time?
I geek out about systems sometimes more than I do mixing. And this felt a bit like an epiphany, like a game changer. And I got so excited about it. And it was very close when we met that I had just kind of like started doing that. But I really wanted to spend like a year to a year and a half in it before I started like creating authoritative content about it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like I wanted to test it and tweak it. And even like my latest template is from like July 22nd. So like it's continued to evolve in how I'm using it and fine tuning it. So.
And you've had commercial releases with that.
Oh yeah.
In place, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Can we back up and do like 30,000 feet? Tell me the difference. Like I'm 5. Between objects and beds.
Beds are fixed channel positions, and it only really matters if you're panning between those fixed positions. So front, sides, let's say you put something in between those, there's going to be equal volume coming out of both. For the object perspective, whatever system you're on, be it 5.1, let's say you have less speakers or more speakers, the object is going to be a little more defined just to that location, whereas a bed is going to be an average between the speakers. So let's think a theater that has 30 speakers. You put something in the bed right there, it's coming out of 3 that are right here and 3 that are right here. 3 speakers. But if you put it in an object, it's coming out of the 1 that's in that location.
Interesting.
So just think like pixels.
Yeah.
You're averaging, you're getting more resolution with an object because it's metadata that says, what system are you on? Let me place this here according to the system. Whereas the channel base is, if you've got 30% here, 30% here, and 30% here or whatever, that's going to fold down 30. It's going to be plus 30, 30, 30. Here's a good example. This is a 714 room. If I put one thing in the side channel, it's going to be in the side and not front and rear. But a 5.1 has to phantom that side, so it's going to play out of both.
Yeah.
So an object is going to do the same thing when there's no speaker there. Like if there was a speaker there, it will play it out of a speaker. If there's no speaker there, it will average out of the 2. But a bed will always average out of the 2.
Got it.
I don't know. That's far too complicated for my.
Well, but the big thing that matters is with Atmos, the beauty of it, or at least in my mind, and why it's significantly better than 5.1, is it's expandable to whatever the rig is. So like if you have 916 or 926 or whatever, if it's an object, it's going to, like he said, feel more placed every time the system gets bigger. And then as it shrinks, it also, I think, retains its placement in the binaural better because you can give it size, right?
I would say the binaural thing is big because think if you got a stereo wet affected guitar track you're very much committed to how that sounds in stereo. But if you have a mono guitar track that's not affected, but you push that through effects, you can kind of change the resolution of how the stereo feels, and you can position things a little better, like mono going through effects live versus what you've already baked in.
So other than maybe like super pop, I feel like you were telling me what you had found was the Atmos mix is like a superized stereo mix. Like that's the best translation versus like, oh, claps are up here and stomps are here, and it's like as the format has sort of gone on for 2 years, it's like Atmos is less gimmicky and more about like enlarging the perspective.
Well, it was the same thing with 3D. Like the first couple 3D movies were all about what jumps out at your face and you can really see like right there. And then some of them got to the place where you just have the glasses on and you're like, there's a lot of depth here. Like I feel like I'm there. And I think that's the leap in maturity is some of those gimmicks were tried out and like, okay, that's getting tired. We're getting tired of that. Let's just put people in a space.
Yeah.
We were having a conversation yesterday about stereo. Kind of went through the same phase of the Beatles putting all the drums on one side and then all the bass on the other side.
Well, there's an exploration to it.
Yeah.
For sure. You know?
We need to fail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's not even that music is so subjective that it's not that there's a right or wrong, but I do think there's a more optimal combination of things. Like there is a bit of a bell curve of like you didn't go far enough, and then there's a sweet spot, and then you went too far. You know, and so there's bell curve that we have to figure out where like we've optimally blended things, pushed and pulled the most emotion out of the song to deliver on the vision, and we pushed it to the edge, and we got like we're riding a little risky, you know, but we didn't like drop off the edge.
I'm curious now that how long have you been doing like Atmos mixes?
Like is this 3 years? 2021. So 2021, 22, 23. So 4.
Okay. And
yeah.
A good fair bit of time. Have you... I mean, it definitely feels like the Wild West.
Yes.
As you're working, are you finding those kind of best practice things, I guess?
Yes. So,
like, I mean, even the silly things, like, I mean, yeah, it could be as simple as like we keep snares and kicks center, basses are generally like, are there weird rules like that are just like this tends to translate or this is a very bad idea? Like,
you know, it's like music theory. Like there were rules that got built, and then people figured out how to break the rules. But it's because of the structure of those rules that you then have like a contrast of dissonance and resolution. And so I think if it's all dissonance, it's all chaos, it's not satisfying. And I think with Atmos and the learning curve, everybody's like, woohoo, I can throw things everywhere, and they're being a little reckless. And the maturity of figuring out like, I want to feel this, so I make the move, but then you might find out that move didn't make me feel the thing that I wanted. So you've gained a bit of wisdom of a less optimal way to make you feel something. But then maybe you found something that did make you feel the thing. So you put that in the win category. So you start stacking up like, this didn't really work and achieve my goal. This did. And then maybe there's some things over here that work for another situation. So you're like, you just start categorizing and building the wisdom through the experience of this didn't work in this situation, this did. And like as you do that, you build a lattice work of rules, I guess. It's not that they're rules. It's just you know, you've discovered what kind of works and doesn't, or what's a very consistent way to deliver on your goals. You know.
And it is, you mentioned the thing about emotion. I feel like a lot of those moves, from someone who does not mix Atmos, highly interested, but who does not, like coming from almost where like left right can be very technical because you're having to do so much surgery to get things to fit. Like the cool thing, when at least from a consumer standpoint, when I listen to good Atmos mixes, it does make you immediately feel something. Like you are in the vibe of whatever the artist, the engineer, like wanted you to feel. And the bad ones are kind of like, oh well, that's over there. Like it's night and day. So I'm just, as somebody who's not doing it, not in that world, I'm curious, like what's the difference there? How does that work? And that may be a silly question.
Well, to me, it's the same thing. Like, in stereo, yes, there's like frequency overlap.
Yeah.
Like some of your instruments are going to overlap how they come together. So you're trying to make sure that as you bring things together, it's not necessarily that instruments get lost, but as they play together, they work together to deliver the feeling. And sure, at times you can hear each one individually, but they should also like come together and not distract from each other. They shouldn't be fighting with each other. So in the Atmos world, it should be the same thing, where when it hits, like if it's in the room or in headphones, you shouldn't feel like there's anything distracting you. And if it's untethered and like there's something that's too far away, but like the sonics are not really, there's nothing bridging that gap, and you just kind of hear it, but it feels out of place. Like that feeling of, well, that's weird, or that's wrong, or that's distracting. You want to avoid that, but there are ways to tether sonics together so that there's a lattice work of frequencies that like build out an Atmos mix. It's not just guitars here and synths back here and vocal backgrounds up here. Like you're not just like separating things, you're making sure that the frequencies like hold hands throughout, and then as it comes back together, are they still holding hands, or are they stepping on each other's toes?
I really like that. When you showed us the one example of that didn't belong back there, I immediately flipped back to an acting coach that told me something, because I would always just walk around on stage, and she was like, why are you walking there? And the whole point was, you don't move there unless you have a purpose to move there. And it feels very much the same thing. And like, yes, these are a whole new set of tools to work within and a lot of space, but it could also just be like wasted space if you don't have like motivation to put something somewhere in an artistic way.
Well, that's like the first time you discovered a ping pong delay, and you're like, oh, this is so cool that it goes back and forth. But then, you know, you mature a little bit, and you're like, you learn strategic ways to use a ping pong delay. So in the same way with the room, we've always had the frontal plane to deal with. And then maybe as things play, we learn how to push and pull the emotion in the room. So it's not just that it's not that it's just all there because it's motivationless. I don't even know if that's a word, but yes, the motivation of, I'm trying to push and pull or create like bursts of focus that make sense. Like that's what you want, not just, I can move it over here, so I move it over there.
Well, I like too, when you hear someone talk in a room, like I can find you if my eyes are closed, like in front of me, but you also hear it off the walls.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting about the mixes that I feel like I like the most are the ones that feel the most natural to the way you would hear it. Not like, hey, I'm on stage with the drummer and it's like, not that, but it's like you're almost hearing it as though it's real life.
Yeah. You could experience the space in which she was singing as if you were standing.
And you're getting to create that.
That's the reason why people like mixing in a room versus headphones, not just for Atmos, but like there's air that moves around your ears. Like you can tell when there's like cans on your ears and it feels claustrophobic or closed off, but like you open your ears up and you hear all those reflections. And so we naturally I think we naturally gravitate toward it's felt, not heard. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like if it's the kind of thing where in an Atmos mix, if you do have some of that going on and you took it away, you'd miss it. Like you took it away and put it in 2 speakers, you're like, okay, I'm being projected something. But then you put the Atmos mix on and you're like, okay, I'm experiencing her in the room with me because I hear the air moving behind me like it would if she was in the room.
There's the passion mix where the people start singing and you like bring them in from behind and you feel like you're in like the 4th row and there's like 10,000 people behind you. Do you know what song I'm talking about that you mixed?
Gratitude.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
So like even that's a great example of like it. I don't know if you notice it at the beginning of the song,
You know,
because they're not singing, and when they come in, all of a sudden like that space shifts, and you could have put them anywhere, but like the placement of it again like gives you size.
So, okay, on that note, with a song like that, when you're presented with all of these things, now we've talked about like you can move something to move something, and you can do it with direction. Like, what does that process look like? How are you? I mean, I imagine sometimes are you doing Atmos mixes that you're not also mixing a left-right?
correct.
Okay, so in an instance like that, where you kind of have stems that are, I don't know if they would be limiting or not, but what's like the planning process in your head? Or you sitting and listening to it being like, what do I want to experience in this moment? Or does that come with direction from the artist? Or is it kind of still the Wild West in that sense? Like,
Yeah. Well, it's not I'll say this, it's not the Wild West. It's the lower basement of a library and I'm just alone by myself at a desk. like nobody's speaking into anything, unfortunately. Like they just kind of hand it to you and say, do your thing, which I guess there's freedom in that, but that's where you have to have the experience of what are the ingredients that I'm given, how many ingredients, like for a live thing. Let's say there's one stereo crowd stem. Well, there's things to consider with just one stereo crowd stem versus they had 4 to 8 that they gave me that are all separate. That doesn't mean that you can't create a great Atmos mix with that one stem, but that's a little more limiting. And also just depending on the mix, especially with a live thing, like I kind of just want to take those ingredients and say, like even just listening to the stereo, like they were trying to convey the liveness of the event. So I'm going to try to create that in the 3D space. And hopefully when it folds down, it stays faithful to whatever the stereo mix was. But then when you pop it into Atmos, you're like, oh, it makes sense that the crowd is behind me, but not just in a tethered way, not just behind me, but like there's some here, but it's mostly like coming around you where the band is in front of you and it makes sense. Like you feel that it makes sense and you're not missing. Like there's always going to be some in front of you too, you don't just pop it in the back and it's distracting. Like it came in as a distraction when the crowd cheered, like if the whole room roars and swells, it's like, that's what you want. You want the whole room to feel like it's moving, not just, oh, I took that stereo stem and panned it in the back because crowds go in the back. Like that's the example of a rule that was just followed with no consideration or nuance. But I use Energy Panner for that. It's a plugin. Like Energy Panner, based on a certain threshold, will pan something. It's almost like a compressor for a surround panner. And I'll take an Energy Panner and push it through a 714 reverb so it moves, but it's also everywhere. So it's not just a direct signal that's moving, it's like the focus swell kind of moves a little bit, but then it's also everywhere.
This is kind of blowing my mind. Like I know the principles, but now knowing there are tools in place.
Well, like even with that, so you push it through this, so you have Energy Panner pushing into the reverb.
Mm-hmm.
In stereo world, I feel like we're hyper controlling like, oh, the width of that, and it's very easy to do that. With the way the renderer and everything is working together, can you tighten that in easily? Or is it kind of like I'm spitting this in and what I'm having to like sort of live with whatever it's spitting back out.
I think what you're asking is about control. Like how much control?
Yeah.
Like, yes. Like especially with that panner, there are things that happen where when you're listening in the room, it feels balanced, and then you go down to headphones and the volume jumped because of a position. Because like people have done studies of wherever you position things, does it add volume or lower the volume? And so, yeah, you got to be careful about how that's translating. And for me, I'll always choose the safer bet of it just translating and matching the stereo, as opposed to, no, I really want it to do this thing in the room.
So like Tarantino shoots in 70mm film, right? So it's made for like huge screen. So he doesn't really care about the end user at your house because it's going to get blackbarred. So like for you, in a similar way, are you thinking like, hey, the format's going to eventually get to where people will hear it in 714? Or are you thinking about binaural? Like, what's the priority? Because I think the format, you ultimately are getting to make that choice. Like, are you sort of like tailoring it for headphones now, or for what it could be in the right environment?
Like hoping where it's going to be in the future.
So there's like the Venn diagram of how things fit together. There's the stereo mix, Atmos mix in the room, Atmos mix in headphones. And at least for a while, the Apple Spatial did not play well with either of those. Perfect. Like trying to push those things to overlap together was very difficult. And it felt like there was compromise. Ultimately, I'm just trying to stay faithful to like the vision of the song, which the stereo kind of is our reference point for now. Sure, we might like depart in our preferences from how we listen, but at least for now, the anchor is like stereo. So the binaural should at least stay faithful in balances, in tone, and that's totally achievable. Like, yes, Apple adds like its own little reverb thing, which is annoying. That may change over time, but I'm also referencing the Dolby fold down. So just 2.0 fold down from Atmos, and that can sound almost identical to the stereo. So if we get to the place where Apple kind of relents and maybe Spotify does the Dolby fold down instead of Apple, well, people are actually going to hear basically what the stereo sounded like. I'm trying to compromise, but I'm most certainly not like putting my foot down that, oh, well, it sounds amazing in the room, so I just don't care how it sounds in headphones.
Yeah.
Like I'm most certainly like making sure that I stay faithful for now with how it sounds.
Well,
current headphone configuration.
That makes sense to me. The Atmos mix is really informed still right now by the stereo mix. Like, you don't get a stereo mix that's like very forward and like in your face, and then Atmos go like pew 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 pew. It's like that that like informs.
I don't think there will be a shift until people start mixing Atmos first and either using a fold down or kind of like doing the tandem thing. But that, I feel like it has to be a handoff. It's never just going to be someone saying, I'm mixing all in Atmos. Like, people aren't ready for that yet. Yeah. But what they're going to do is do this kind of thing where they mix stereo and Atmos at the same time and see like, what can I do for both? And then you learn the techniques of what translates. Yeah. And then maybe you can start taking your foot off the gas of stereo and achieve the exact same thing using that 2.0 fold down. And then once that's happening, people might just start exploring, and it evolves like the sound of the session.
So what's different about what you're doing currently is you're taking in, like you were saying, most people are taking in stems and building an Atmos mix from that. You're taking in the raw original session tracks that are feeding both a stereo mix and then an Atmos mix.
Yes.
So that all of those decisions that you're making about the feel, the overall picture, are informed in both places. And then just as a thought process currently, you're focused like first moments in mixing it, whatever that means, is really on the stereo, and then checking to see translation, and then making it the best it can be or then making Atmos decisions once stereo is done.
Yes.
Which I don't know anybody else that's doing that, which is what makes
the closest I've heard about is Bob Clearmountain doing something like that. But even still, like his is not like the same thing.
I'm super excited to see it, because I think even just like to say it out loud, I'm making decisions for stereo. Now I'm listening to it in the room as your room's 714, right? So 714, and then you're listening from there to the binaural render. So it's like you're able to make informed decisions in real time in one session about all three formats that people listen to.
Yes.
That's bonkers.
I know. That's what I'm saying, dude. When he was explaining this to me, I was like losing my mind, because it's genius. Because even if it takes you, what does it normally take you to mix? If you know Atmos, a stereo track,
I'd say like 3 to 4 hours.
Yeah.
Like if I'm really like digging in, like 5, but we'll just say like 3 to 4 is like a good method of getting through a mix.
Adding Atmos into it, what is the time for a track?
We can't forget about, like, a lot of times if I'm just doing Atmos, I'm given stems. But if I had to mix it in stereo, the process of making stems for Atmos, which I would probably want to do a little more than, like, I would want to separate things a little more than usual. But let's just add another, 30 minutes to an hour for
at least.
Yeah, for stems. Yeah. Which, I mean, we can talk about that. I have a part of my template is to make sure that goes quickly as well. So we're like 20-30 minutes on stems.
Oh, geez.
But then now as one process.
But let's add that on. It's baked in. Now you got to do the Atmos mix. I mean, an hour and a half to 2 hours.
That's so stupid.
But then if I'm doing it all within the same session, like the Atmos portion of that is like 30 minutes extra of moves, 30 minutes to an hour extra of moves tacked on to the stereo, because you only have to make a decision once. Your brain capacity to listen to something and make a decision is compacted into those moments. Like, okay, guitar track, like, listen to it. All right, I'm painting this one left, this one right. Rhythm 1 and 2. Okay, here's like a counter melody one. Okay, we're gonna do that left and right, but these are gonna go on the sides for Atmos. Those are gonna go up front. Boom, done. Like you've made that decision, and it's a panning decision, but now you're carving both up to fit well with each other, and you're referencing. But yeah, the amount of thinking and processing you have to do is significantly shortened.
One last question, because I know. Because I'm just curious, like, so take the guitar idea, and I think I've seen you do this, or maybe you do this. Maybe like pan it a mono guitar to the left, and then you'll have a delay that's only in the right, that's like 100% wet, so it's giving you this feel. In Atmos, if you have that guitar panned, are you sending it to like a separate aux track that's doing that delay somewhere else, or is it like
maybe
send to some, like, is the workflow similar in that, or is it not as critical?
Since we're also used to working in stereo, like, you don't want all your low end on one side and your high end on the other.
Sure.
Like, you want there to be balance across the board and width. And so in the same way, when you think about Atmos, like, okay, if there's a nice direct like edge U2 something in the left, his little, dotted quarter delay can go maybe behind you somewhere on the side. If there's a nice, like, if there's something that matches the tone and directness of this guitar in the right, like let's say it's a synth part or piano part, you still kind of want that balance. But there's definitely like an order to the priorities. Like fullness, you want that up front. And then if there's more fullness, okay, let's pull that into the side. So you're not losing any fullness up front. You're just extending the fullness. Or there's fullness here, and then maybe there's a high synth that's like doing like a real I don't know, chirpy. Yeah, maybe try bringing that up top. So you're extending the focus, you're extending the feeling into different parts of the room, but you're not detaching it. So like that's why the ingredients matter. Like if you're just working from one stereo guitar stem, you're kind of baked into being up front, and there's ways to get it, in the room a little bit. But if you had 4 guitar parts, that Stephen Stanley song that I love so much, there was a bright picked acoustic that was a left and a right doubled, and then there was a rubber bridge that was a left and a right doubled, and they were counter picking with each other. So the brights were up front because it was like the main focus, but the rubber bridge can go on the side, and it feels like it's tethered and extended. Whereas in stereo, okay, it's just they're both there, it makes sense, but like you're able to utilize more space because you have more ingredients to pull it out. It makes sense. And I've used this analogy before where if you're learning to fly, like you can learn by only flying on instruments. Like theoretically you can do that. But there's something, and that would be mixing on headphones. Like you can make it work just with instruments, but there's definitely a safety and another sensory of information by having the windshield there. And even if you don't know the instruments well enough, you could be totally upside down in a plane, and that whatever that ball is, like I don't know the name of
equator.
it.
Yeah, or whatever.
Oh yeah, I'm level. Or maybe your trims are off, but you're looking level, and you don't know quite how to read the instrumentation, and you may be totally upside down and messed up and headed toward the ground, or whatever it is. So like it's possible, but in headphones, there's so many things that you're not being told that it's still just a gamble,
I'll tell you the thing I'm most excited about that was, and you alluded to it earlier, is like acoustic guitar. Like you're in a room with a good acoustic and it's like full and fat, and then you put it in like a stereo mix and it's like bye low end, boosting top, try to make it cut, get rid of, and it's like even with that Miranda Lambert, is that who it is? Mix? That acoustic sounds like an actual acoustic guitar, because you don't have to like murder it to get it to fit in a mix. You like have so much more space. And so like as a musician, it's like all those years of like wood shedding to like get something to speak actually has potential for that to happen in an Atmos mix, which I can't believe I'm saying that, because I was squarely on the like, this is gonna die like 5.1 did,
Well, and the thing is, it still might die. Like Atmos mixes, like do they matter? Probably not. It's still always about the song. A good song will survive bad mixes, bad production decisions. You want an optimal performance for sure, but like it's just a vehicle of delivering on a vision and kind of expanding the emotional connection to a song. So if people can listen to that and experience it well, like Atmos might stick around. It's a great vehicle to do that, and right now it's just a good way to serve people. Like it's a need in the music community because Apple has said it's a need. And so labels want to have it. Like it's a way to serve. Like get out of your head the gripe, oh but Atmos sucks, oh it's a big investment and nobody cares about it. That all might be true, and at the same time there's a need for it. Like labels want it, people are asking for it, powers that be are asking for it. Artists aren't necessarily asking for it, but it's just a way to serve, and then selfishly it's fun to listen in this room.
Well, I was gonna say, I feel like if somebody gets to experience it in a room, not necessarily headphones, but in a room, then you're gonna want it.
Well, yeah.
Like, I don't want to listen to music any other way.
Well, dude, you go to an IMAX and you're like, oh, I'm blown away. You don't immediately go home and like, I have to put in an Atmos theater.
Well, and now, so now we have people getting Oculus or VR and putting a theater in front of their eye holes because they want that experience.
Yeah. Most will still listen to a song on an iPhone on a counter. Well, that's fine. Yeah. The tech is catching up to the format. and people are gonna start doing better work in Atmos.
Yeah.
Same with digital. Like there were tape and analog junkies.
We're just talking about
Like
this.
it went to digital, but there were people who learned, okay, I can take the convenience of digital and optimize the way I work, and then the technology caught up to making it sound good, and now everybody's adopted it. And same with like studios versus laptop bedroom producers.
Yeah.
Like there are some people sticking their nose up like, no, you have to go in a commercial space to make music. And then there's some dudes making great music on a laptop. Like, screw you guys, I'm gonna make music. I think that attitude of like, screw you guys, I'm gonna make a song, Atmos, mono, stereo, whatever, I'm just gonna make it.
Yeah.
And there will be enough people that work well in Atmos to where it's like, yeah, this is the product, this is it, like it sounds good, this is how I want it to be out. Whether or not my legs get cut off by this, like more and more mixers are seeing, oh, I probably need to jump on board with this. So like, yeah, I was a probably second wave adopter, which meant I was getting a lot of after the fact work. Like, oh, we did the stereo mix, we need it done in Atmos, or here's back catalog, do it. And now we're seeing a lot more mixers keep it in-house and like, okay, well, I did the stereo mix, I want to do the Atmos mix, and you know what, that's probably a good decision, which is why this is helpful, and which is why people like me who have been doing a lot of Atmos work after the fact, like that might start going away, and people who initiate the stereo mix might do the Atmos mix too, and that'll get better. Like people will learn, and it's a less convoluted process.
So is it too late if one wanted to start?
No, it's like the perfect time. Well, here's what I'll say. This is a very honest answer. This is a very vulnerable and honest answer. So you may or may not use this. Like
I hate
just like anything. Like if you're the first in the West to plant a flag, great, you're king of the hill for a minute, but then there's a rush of 100 people coming after you, and you still have to defend your hill. So I'm grateful to have had my time adopting it and getting in circles to like have a rush of Atmos mixing. And now a lot of the guys that I was taking their Atmos mix and taking their stereo mix and putting into Atmos, a lot of them are putting in Atmos rig, which means they're gonna get that Atmos work, and I'm probably not. People will still pursue me for Atmos, but my comfort and identity is not in like being the Atmos guy, because I know it can go away. Like being the guy that gets hired for Atmos, that might be going away, or there might be a top tier of people like Steve Genowick or whoever who've like kind of made their name as Atmos. Like they may always kind of get the work because some people want to delegate it that way, but a lot of people who are mixing and like, yeah, I think I want to do Atmos too, this is the wave for that, for like I want to do both in my operation. And yeah,
this is more of a philosophical, maybe futurism kind of question, but firstly, how did you feel when you first got this room and got to start experiencing music consistently?
Yeah, was it kind of like Steve, where he's like,
you mean Atmos?
Yeah.
My initial thought was just serving a need. Like I saw that people needed it in my circles, so I was like, I'm gonna serve this need. So I put it in and kind of hit the ground running. I had like 5 projects lined up by the time Dolby came to tune this place. So I didn't really have time, and at least at the moment there was no way. There were very few ways to play back Atmos in this room. Like it was a small catalog, so like, yeah, you could kind of hear what people were doing.
Jeez.
Well,
but it was a lot of like what you worked on is what you got to hear in Atmos. Yeah.
So now that there's a growing catalog and you get to experience other things, how do you feel if Atmos does keep rolling, keeps growing, people adopt it? Do you think that there's potential to convert people to like appreciating music again? Because I feel like a contributing factor to that kind of dying off is not only just streaming multitudes of music just everywhere, but limiting the dynamic range of pretty much everything that's coming out these days, right? Like it's just everybody's trying to get loud stereo mixes, like you said, people are playing it off their phone. But do you think that once people realize that there's a new way to experience it, that it might foster a new appreciation for people to want to have maybe a listening space, or dedicate, like people used to have full stereo setups with their vinyls and sit down to listen to records? Do you think we can ever get back to something like that?
Absolutely, but that's always been a heart issue, not a format issue.
Totally.
Like the same thing happened with beer. Like Budweiser and like the Coors, they became like the big dogs, and then people were like, I'm tired of this, we're opening up a craft brewery, and now craft breweries are soaring and those corporate dudes are tanking. Same with coffee, bookstores.
How long did it take? It took an hour from Atmos to beer.
But like the format will never make the thing. It's always about the song. And I do think there's, like, with vinyl becoming a thing, I think there's a wave of people in their hearts wanting to connect with something. So if Atmos can be a vehicle for helping them experience it just a little bit better, a little bit more emotionally, I don't know if anyone will ever know, like, whether or not they're listening to a song and going, oh yes, I do think the Atmos mix is what I prefer. Like, like a small percentage of people are saying that.
Yeah.
But if they don't even know it and they've got it in headphones and they feel like they're in the space, which they can't now, it's not quite there.
Right.
Like binaural's not quite there, but eventually we'll have personal HRTFs where the iPhone takes a picture, or you take a measurement in a room with microphones in your ears,
or you get Neuralink and you just stream it to your brain.
Dude, I've been wanting to try out those headphones that are the bone vibrators.
Yeah.
It's like there's so much technology coming out where like people could feel and experience music. You get like, what are those, the vibrating vests to feel bass.
There's a push for immersiveness in every aspect of everything we do, gaming, videos, however.
Well, and so this is what's so dumb. I'm gonna tell you something dumb. I mixed Atmos stuff for like live records, and the live record will come out on Apple Music, and below that is the deluxe set of videos. All of the videos are in stereo, all of the audio is in Atmos, and I'm like, this is dumb. You guys, like Apple, you have a problem. I've asked the Apple people before, like, why can't you do this? And they're like, we just haven't implemented it yet. We haven't figured it out yet. And I'm like,
that's the turning point.
Like people like content creators who are creating visuals with Atmos, with it, like the amount of things you can pair with an experience, like do that, bolster it, like lean into it. Don't leave things on the table.
And where do people watch those? They don't watch them on their phone. They put them on their TV where they might have a sound bar that might have.
Well, dude, think about this. Fathom events at a movie theater. Like somebody puts out a live Red Rocks live worship. Go to a theater, rent it out for people to come for a one-night event to experience the concert.
Yeah.
And maybe you have them there to play a few acoustic songs or do a live Q&A, and they're able to experience something with you. Like that's a new experience that people haven't really had before. We haven't had a live concert, not really the concert. You know what I mean? Like and so there's so many untapped ways to roll out an experience to people. Dude, I'm not saying churches need to spend money on an Atmos mix or Atmos rig, but like just imagine, they're all set up for AV right now, giant projectors. Imagine the amount of music where like, hey, church event night, come pay $10 and we're gonna watch through this live worship experience together, and it's gonna be like in Atmos, like. There's so many things. Podcasts, audiobooks, they're going into Atmos.
Well, and even I think, I can't remember if it was Udalink, there's a manufacturer whose name I can't remember right now that makes a small speaker that they, like in the description it says spatial equipped, and apparently you guys have been testing it where it'll send a beep, and because they all have microphones and speakers, they can basically set up a room with delays like that's, to me, that's the future. You know, these
Right.
$30 speakers.
Yes.
Well, those
that will
are
configure
already
themselves.
out, and you can go get them at Best
Yeah.
Buy right
Yeah,
now.
one thing that you set up that's scalable,
Yeah,
that you
that's-
can just plug in and put places, and then it calibrates itself.
Mhm.
I guess a great
Just
way.
meshes itself together.
Yeah, great way to listen to music.
Now, my main question here, I get to wrap this back around to a more technical question, I suppose.
Mm.
It horrifies me because I lean so hard on my mix bus,
Mhm.
like to a fault, probably. And I feel like, I mean, obviously you don't have a mix bus in Atmos, but that makes me really nervous. I don't know. I guess that's not a question.
Well, let me respond to your concern by saying you're wrong. You can lean on it in Atmos. Like it. Well, okay. Let me back up. I don't personally push into the 2-bus in the same way other people do, because it can get, like, once you get that balance and movement, you're kind of stuck there. Otherwise, it either gets out of control or you haven't pushed enough.
Yeah.
So I like to use more sidechain and saturation to do that in a controllable way, almost like your faux doing it.
So you're like simulating pump.
Yes, based on sidechains more so than actual, like.
Yeah.
It's like, if I can achieve the movement with the sidechain instead of the actual gain triggering it, I'd rather do that because it's a little more controllable, not affecting the
Makes
sound.
total sense.
So do you?
But either way, what I'll say with that is, whatever sound you've got going through a 2-bus right now, even if you print stems, you're not getting the same
Right.
same movement unless you've sidechained it all.
Yes.
But this way of going stereo and Atmos at the same time, whatever plugins you have on there, you just duplicate them to your Atmos bus. The whole mix goes through there the same way. So if you're utilizing sidechains, the same sidechain and movement you get out of the stereo can happen on the Atmos the exact same way.
So on your so how many Atmos buses? Is it 20?
So it's
24?
so 7.1.4 is 12 channels.
Yep.
So just we'll just call it 36 channels.
So then do you use the inserts and group them so that all of your
Yes.
and then
Yeah. So they're all grouped
Sure,
together
sure.
and they all have side chains. So they're acting as 36 mono channels,
yeah.
basically running through the same stuff.
That's
My
legit.
God.
And my computer will die. So that's like the big
yes.
takeaway is I have to buy a new computer.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've thought about just having like a Mac Mini that I only run bus processing on.
Yeah.
And I just do like a share screen, and like all the channels route out through that and then back in virtually. So then on that computer only is like the amount of processing to run that.
You are a systems guy.
I know.
I love it.
Well, and see, here's the problem. I've had a heart check recently. Like somebody kind of hockey checked me on my heart, that I've gotten so excited about systems that I think in ways I've turned into Budweiser or McDonald's, where like at the beginning I was so excited that I could provide I'm thinking of that movie with the McDonald's movie.
Oh, I know.
The founder, Michael Keaton.
Yes.
So when he goes and sees them with the ketchup going, and it's like a 3 ketchup thing, and they build that burger so fast and give it to the person, and we're all like, that system was amazing. I think that's cool. And then it moved into just, okay, efficiency, and over time you lose quality, or you lose the heart of making a burger. And that's why awesome one-off burgers or burger chains come up, because like oh, McDonald's is all about efficiency and like getting it done, but you like lose the quality and the heart. And I think I've had about a year and a half, and maybe even backing up before that, excitement about the system so much that sometimes I've lost the heart of turning knobs until it feels good, and like really pushing and pulling something. So it can happen. Even though I'm excited about this template and excited like about what it offers, I can't forget that, like, yes, the system and the architecture is there to serve, like, make it easier for me to bring my heart into it. And
but the exciting part about what you're talking about, though, is it kind of you build a system to get out of the way.
Yes.
To do the creative things, because it's, I mean, if you had to sit there and recreate this
the master,
every time,
that's what I'm thinking with stems. That horrifies me.
Yeah.
Right.
I would lose the creative flow so fast.
Yeah.
But with this, it's like you're allowing yourself to stay in that through the development of a system. So I think it's cool. But I can relate to what you're saying pretty hard. So
well, it's the same way, man. We like the system and architecture that provided convenience. You accidentally lean a little too hard on the convenience. Mm-hmm. And like, oh, it goes through the bus. This is automatic. This is quick. I can be quicker about this. Mm-hmm. And though quick can be good for the situation, quick at the expense of haphazardly moving through something is bad.
Your two bus, like right now, the two bus is informing Atmos, right? Or your stereo mix. Sorry,
for the moment, yeah.
But like, have you learned anything about like, oh man, because Atmos is more just inherently dynamic, has that pushed back on your stereo mixes? Where it's like,
I'll definitely, I guess ping pong's the wrong word. I'll let there be this informing back and forth. You know, I don't just like build the stereo and then leave it there and go to Atmos. I'll like do the stereo and then I'll get the same vibe in Atmos, and then I might like push the Atmos a little bit and see if that could make the stereo better. Like, oh, well, okay, I brought up the saturation here, let's try it over here in the stereo world, and it may be nope, didn't work, or ooh, like that made it 1% to 2% better. And so I'm trying to make sure I don't leave anything on the table. I don't just like do it and move on saying like, well, it's there, like leave it that way. Like there's definitely that, like one makes the other better, until I've gone, yeah, I can't do any more without messing both of them up.
If you guys stuck around for that whole thing, congratulations. You have a nerd mind just like myself. And if you want to dive deeper into that, there's a whole lot more stuff coming with Warren. And even if you're not into Atmos, there's a wealth of information here to be had. Thank you guys for sticking around. I'll see you in the next one.